The reason why I actually was here today was to share my experiences um, with testicular cancer. And what happened to me about 3 years ago is I had some soreness in one of my testicles. Had the reaction, I think, that may be quite common is it's nothing. It's going to go away. It's not. Well, I grew up playing sports and got lots of injuries and know lots of I have aches and pains and everything else, and so it wasn't one of those big deals. And I'm a teacher here in Halifax, and I was off in the summer, and so I was running around doing all kinds of things, and I just felt it was something that was probably going to not affect me. And of course, the biggest influence, of course, is my wife and my kids, and my wife was like, "You got to go and get this checked right away. We're not going to fool around with this. There's something wrong." And she was very thorough in her examinations of me. And so she said, "There's definitely something wrong here. One is swollen. I feel something on one of them." And I was like, "I can't feel anything. I think you're overreacting, And of course, she made the appointment, and I started to get into let's just try some antibiotics, see if it's that, and then I did an ultrasound, and of course we found that there was a tumor, and it had to be removed. And luckily, for me and for us, that it wasn't cancerous, and it was caught in an early stage before it became cancerous. And so I was very, very, very fortunate, but I had to go through the same exact process, and I had to have it removed, and now I have one. So I'm happy to say that. And on the panel, we have Ryan, who is a survivor. We have Jonathan, who is a survivor, and we have Dina, who is a mother, who's a caregiver, who's going to tell her side of the story. We flipped a coin or drew straws, and Jonathan got to go first. And he's going to.
Yes. So my name's Jonathan Schrader, and from North Carolina. I've been in Halifax for about 7 years now, and I was invited on the panel to talk about my experience with testicular cancer. I was actually, my father had testicular cancer, and so I always grew up being quite mindful of TC and the possibility that I could get it at some point. And so I was always pretty careful, diligent in checking myself, and I was so I'm 40 now. I was 35 at the time, and I was checking myself, and I would check myself every couple weeks, and I was like, it seems like something's there, and you're like, nah, it's probably not anything, and you check yourself a couple weeks later, and you're like, it seems like there's something there. Well, we'll wait 2 weeks and see if it's still there. So that I would say that probably, even though it was pretty top of mind, and supposedly, Lori, maybe you can speak to this, but supposedly there's no genetic link from father to son, but it's still, I was quite mindful of it, and eventually, my testicle got to the point where it was pretty tough to ignore that something was indeed going on there. So I went and I can't really. This was every time I forget. I was telling Lori this. Every time I forget something, I blame the chemo. But I can't remember if I involved my wife at this point or not, or if it was more a little quietly went to the doctor and set up an appointment. I think I actually was fairly quiet about setting up the appointment with my GP, and went in and she checked me out, and so there's definitely something there. She didn't know exactly what it was, and she sent me set me up with an ultrasound, and so I went in for the ultrasound, and I was called a couple days later, and they said, indeed it is, the gentleman who called he didn't want to say it was cancer. He was I'm trying to think that my doctor was out, and he didn't want to be the one to deliver the news. And I was getting ready to hop on a plane for a business trip for a couple days, and I said, is it cancer? I basically was like forcing him to tell me. He's like, more likely than not, or so. So finally, I step on a plane about 2 hours later, and in the interim, I had to tell my wife that I had cancer, and then literally like 30 minutes later, my driver came and picked me up and took me to the airport. And so that was a challenging beginning to the journey for sure, and it was certainly was part of the journey. My journey was, we also, at the time, we had a 1-year-old daughter, and so it was, so she was part of our journey as well, and we think back now, and I'm flashing forward a little bit, but now we have 3 kids, and so we think about, thank you, yes. I did play a role in that. So I think about it's the treatment process from a physical standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, is very challenging, very trying, and to think about doing that with we had 1 child, and to think about doing that with 3 kids, it would be a real struggle, and there are a lot of families out there that do have to juggle all of the challenges that go with that, But again, I skipped ahead a little bit. Lori here is in the audience, and Lori, I guess you could say, saved my life. I was diagnosed as stage 2A, so the cancer had spread. Had my orchiectomy, which I wouldn't recommend unless you really need one, and then had 3 rounds of the standard chemo treatment, I would say that I'm very thankful, very grateful to the team, the staff, Lori, and all the nurses. The doctors get all the credit, but the nurses are amazing. I mean, they don't get thanked nearly enough for all the work and the compassion that they provide along the way. But that was so I was diagnosed March 10th, 2010, and I finished, and so I was in Toronto not long ago on March 10th, 2015, and I was there for business and took myself out for a nice steak dinner and a few drinks to celebrate 5 years since diagnosis, and which I focus on the diagnosis date. I don't know why I do that. Every time I mention it, my wife says, "Oh no, I care about the day you finished chemo," which is coming up in June. So she's much more focused on that. I think we're going to have a party because that'll be 5 years since we finished diagnosis. Finished chemo, and I've been. Lori went through all the surveillance and everything. So I've been 5 years now. I think I'm still doing 2 a year, but I think I'm going to graduate away from that into 1 a year here pretty soon, which is great. I'll miss seeing Lori, but I see her running across the park all the time, so that'll be good. I'd rather see her there than in the hospital. We did. As I mentioned, the health is checked out, which everyone is very, very happy about. And we were able to. We've had a couple kids since then. I know there's been some discussion about fertility and that part of the process, which as as a male, as a man, as you're growing up, it's something that you do care about. And when you're in a relationship as well, it's something that's very, very important. And it's amazing. I may be, I don't know who's watching this. I'm probably sharing more than I should. But we actually really struggled to have kids. We were married for about 10 years, a little less than 10 years before we were able to have kids, and funny enough, after I had chemo, it got a lot easier. So I don't know if it was the drugs. I'm not sure what happened, but we've had 2 kids after, you know, it was really a struggle to have the first one. So so that was a positive, you know, effect of the chemo and the whole cancer experience. And I'm not sure if there's anything else to add at this point. I think maybe I'll turn it over to one of you guys. Should we do a question? I don't know if there should be questions about me telling a story about my.
Yeah. Questions? Or?
What was the most difficult moment or the most difficult issue that you faced in Testicular?
Oh, the floor mic. If you want to go ask a question.
This would be the question. What was the most difficult aspect? Because you see it in such a positive way that I just imagine there were dark times too.
Most difficult aspect of the diagnosis?
Yeah, just everything.
I would say I definitely know what the low point was, and I would say it was a physical low point, but it was probably, you know, it was an emotional low point as well. And I was just sharing this story with another fellow testicular cancer survivor just a couple days ago, and it was late in the 3rd round of chemo. And stage 1, I mean, the first round of chemo, it was okay. Chemo's not fun, but the first round was okay. And then stage 2, you know, the sores started coming, and there was, you know, it got a little messier. Stage 3, I remember it felt like there was just a steel plate in my back. Like it was just, you know, and I had sores, and it was just, I was feeling really drained, you know, physically and emotionally. And I remember someone, I don't know if it was Lori, if it was Pat, someone said, you know, take a bath, Epsom salt, see if that'll help with the pain, and so I did, and I remember feeling, you know, relieved and physical relief being in the tub, and then I couldn't get out. Like I didn't have the energy to get out of a bathtub, and so that was a low point. You know, that my wife, I had to call my wife, and she came up, and she literally just tugged me out of the pool, out of the bathtub, and flopped me onto the floor, and I had to crawl into bed from the bathtub, and so that was probably, you know, from an emotional, from a physical, and the emotional, just knowing that you're so that you've got nothing left, like there's nothing in the tank, and so I would say that was probably the biggest, that was probably the low point. In terms of the challenge, you know, mentally. You know, I did. You know, I'm an analyst by training, and so I did my homework and my reading, and so mentally, I knew the survival rates were very high, and so I didn't really, I never really allowed myself to entertain the notion that this might be the end for me, and I always kept focused on that, you know, with the wife and the young child, and so I never really let that enter into the equation. I would say, you know, notwithstanding that, probably the one time where I was where I was closest to really breaking down was when I actually had to call and tell my parents. Like that was, you know, because that actually was probably the hardest thing to do. You know, my dad was a survivor, and you know, my mom's my mom. You know, I mean, just yeah, she brought me into the world, and to say, you know, I've got cancer, and they're in North Carolina, and I'm here, and so that was you know, probably, you know, emotionally that was a very, very challenging thing for I remember you know, I remember exactly where I was when I did it, and they were remarkably strong and composed. I was the one who was losing it on my end, but yeah, that's I hope that answers the question. One of you guys.
So my name is Ryan Reed. I'm a 23-year-old survivor. When I first was diagnosed, I was 16 years old. It was stage. My mom is basically, she keeps all the notes. She's basically my journal. I have to ask her for the specifics. I kind of just put my head down and went through it. So obviously being 16 years old, I was in high school. Being told you have cancer is kind of difficult because of all the whole drama in high school. I think one of the hardest parts for me was when my friends found out just from a second, somebody saying, "Oh, Ryan Reed's got cancer." Well, he showed up to my door absolutely crying because as soon as you hear somebody has cancer, you assume the worst, right? You think he's going to die. So here my friend shows up at my doorstep absolutely in tears and, has no idea any of the information, just that I have cancer. So it's very difficult to try to actually explain to people what you're going through. It's obviously it's a very tough experience, not just for you, but for your family. My mom and my dad and, my brother and all my friends, I had a great support system. So when I was first diagnosed, 16 years old, going through high school, had to drop out of school, didn't get to write the exams. It was very tough. Found a bump on my testicle. I was at my cottage, and for the gentleman out there, BSDL, ball stuck to leg, just felt the bump, and I was like, okay, that's probably nothing. Like Jonathan said, waited a couple weeks. Eventually told my dad. My dad's like, no, we're going to get this checked out immediately. Went and saw my general practitioner, and before you know it, he did a blood test and said, well, your AFP markers are AFP are way higher than they're supposed to be, so chances are you have cancer. So before I knew it, 3 weeks later, I'm on the surgery table having a testicle removed. Now, the one upside of having a testicle removed is there's some great joke opportunities. Great joke opportunities. I'm on the ball. I'm always on the ball. You can play around with it. So for those of you that work with me or know me, I love to make the jokes at the precise moment for a testicle joke. So after having a testicle removed, I was good for about a year. Unfortunately, after about a year, I was told that I had to do chemotherapy. So I did the 3 cycles of BEP. Not a great time. I was very fortunate that I really kind of got through chemo pretty well. I did have a reaction to Zofran, so I couldn't take Zofran, which is your anti-nausea. So I did have very bad headaches from that. I was one of the few people that probably gained weight on chemo. Thank you, McDonald's, and ate pretty bad, but I got through it. After doing chemo, I was trying to attend university, so I'm a graduate of Mount Allison. So this is right when I'm supposed to go for Frosh Week. So I tell my doctors I'm going to Frosh Week. I don't care. Show up to Frosh Week completely bald from chemo. On my door, they give you all these little nicknames. Before I know it, my name's taken down. I'm now called Chemo Supremo, Chemo Sabi. So I had all these great nicknames, and I had a great time. Got to know a lot of people. Going to school was great. Everything was going perfect. I was done chemo. Before I knew it, found out that the chemo didn't quite take care of all the tumors. I had 3 or 4 tumors in my abdomen, so I had to do RPLND, which, for the doctors out there, I'm probably not going to say this right, retroperitoneal lymph node dissection. Kind of in there? Yeah, there you go. So that was an absolutely horrible time. I didn't enjoy that one bit, but it was here in Halifax. I had a great surgeon, Dr. Ricardo Rendon, and I had great staff at the VG that helped me get through it. Eventually had the surgery done. It's quite the nice incision right on your abdomen. But got through that, and obviously one of the big things about the RPLND is fertility, which I'm very glad, Dr. Power, you touched on. After or before you do your chemo, you have to go do a sample. So you have to donate a sperm sample to a hospital, and it kind of weighs on you. I think that was the first time I kind of realized that this could have an effect on fertility, and I've always wanted to be a dad. It's on the top of my list, and I'm still kind of skeptical about going back and doing the sample to confirm that the sperm count is all good and that I'm actually in fact able to have children. I'm sure it is. It's that final confirmation that this is 7 years on now, and I haven't really gone back and got that done. So fertility is obviously, for me, it was that was one of the hardest parts for me, just knowing that this is something that's going to directly affect your ability to have children. My girlfriend's out there right now. Hey, Amy, how's it going? Sorry about talking about that. So it's definitely a tough experience, and I do think that if there's one thing I can say that cancer has benefited, I've become a stronger person because you have to take a punch to the chin and just work through it. You just got to keep going and not let it snag you up. I've had great support system. My mom, my dad, my brother, my friends. Once they got the information from me properly, you know what I think that's why I am where I am right now. It's because great support system. I could just work through it, and it was just can't say enough about my family and my friends. Cancer is not just, it doesn't just affect you. It's obviously you have to lean on people because you're at your weakest point. So I think I really couldn't have done it without the great nursing staff. I was at the Moncton Hospital for my chemo treatment. The nursing staff there were phenomenal. They would let me in a few minutes early so I could get my preferred chemo chair. I would, one lady I did treatments with was a 98-year-old lady named Rita, and she would ask me to play the Bob Marley or the Beatles whenever she was meeting her grandkids the next day. So it was, you get to meet some great people throughout your process. And like Jonathan said, when you get to actually meet up with a testicular cancer survivor and you get to tell them your stories and you get to talk about everything you guys have gone through, you meet new friends all the time. And that's one benefit about cancer, I guess, is that you get to meet like-minded people and people that have gone through the same thing and kind of develop those relationships. It's very nice. Questions?
It's interesting psychology of that despite everything apparently sort of working well, it's just that last sort of confirmation that the fertility is there, that is a bit scary for you, and that's very poignant for me to think about. And so, but I mean, I don't want to pry, but I hope you're still using contraceptives.
Yes. And now for the...
I did.
You could respond to that one.
I'm too young to be a grandmother. I did keep a journal, and it started when Ryan was 16 because he did everything right. As soon as he felt something, within a couple of weeks, he told his parents, he told his dad. And it took 7 years to get him to this stage where he's become a confident advocate for testicular cancer patients. Every day we're really proud of the fact that he has done so much to further the cause of and awareness of testicular cancer. There was a time when he was going through his, actually when he was first diagnosed, and then subsequent to that had to be told that he had a reoccurrence, that he wouldn't have lunch with me anymore. Every time I would have something bad to tell him, let's go for lunch. I did change it up when I told him, I said, let's meet in Sackville, and by the way, you have to have an RPLND, and this is, would you like pizza? So pizza's kind of, yeah, it's poignant today, absolutely. But from there, Ryan did his RPLND, went back to school, and has been a pillar of strength. And I'm always so proud of the way he carries on the cause and does good work for both TCC and Relay for Life and other cancer organizations. As a caregiver and a parent, you always try to put the best foot forward. Everything's going to be okay. And it did. It came out okay, but it's difficult on the family. But when you have a strong son, it makes it easier. And that's about it. Any questions?
I think she underplays it too. One thing that's important to consider is, when I'm staying in the VG, for 12 days or whatever, there was a cot beside my bed. I don't think she left that cot, so I think, and my dad was staying there. My brother had swine flu at the time, so he actually had to stay quite far away from me. But even through texts and whatnot, he was very supportive. And I think it's important to say, like, my mom and dad were separated at this time and had to become friends to work through, my illness. You know, you have to kind of put apart your differences, I guess, in that case. And I can't speak for my dad and my mom's relationship, but, you know, they had to work through that to put up with a sick son. And I think they did it very well. I couldn't see any bickering or anything amongst them. So they, you know, it was, you have to put aside your differences and just kind of work towards a goal of getting through it, I guess. So, yeah.
One more thing, I guess, for any sort of caregiver, and this is a point that was brought home to me early on, because my Ryan's aunt was a nurse, and keep a journal. Like, I have stacks of stuff. Will I get rid of it at some point? Most likely, but it's still there. I think I have, you know, when we had a consultation with you, Dr. Woods, I have your file there too. When we met, June 16th, 2008. So it's important to keep a journal.
So keeping a journal for which purpose? For
Medical information, and just I needed a purpose because I wasn't sick. But I needed to make sure that I had a purpose, you know, to make sure that, you know, Ryan had good care. And if I had questions, if somebody asked me a question, I didn't want to appear to not have the answer, the proper answer. And I did keep a journal subsequent to that of, you know, personal thoughts, but it wasn't, it was more of a medical file. Yeah.
So how did you relieve stress as a family?
Wine. Oh, no, sorry.
The true answer.
I guess when Ryan had his RPLND and my eldest son was sick with H1N1, we had a tremendous family group around us. My ex-husband's family was there to support us, and we had family around us, and stress relief was, I don't really think we had a lot of, nothing comes to mind really of what we did, except it seemed that we got through each day. And each day that Ryan got a little stronger is when we saw like little flickers of hope and feeling better about that whole process.
One thing for me, I had a friend, his name was Stuart Murray, and every day at 3:30 when I was done chemo, he'd be sitting at my house, you know, on the couch, like, you know, asking me how it was going, and I wasn't eating a whole lot at that point, so he was benefiting from, you know, the Costco drumsticks in my freezer and all the food that I had. So he would come, you know, grab a snack and sit beside me on the couch. We'd toss on, you know, some Netflix or something. And yeah, he was a big, that can be said with all my friends too. They all, you know, made visits, and that was a huge stress reliever. Right? As soon as you can stop thinking about, oh, hospital tomorrow at 8 a.m. and, you know, I've got these things that are going wrong with me, it's pretty easy. It's sitting there with friends just talking about, you know, what are you guys doing in school? Oh, that's cool. And yeah. So many testicle jokes. Just limitless.
Different things that you take through with, you know, Ryan going to fertility. Having to take your son to the fertility clinic is like a humorous thing, because we're walking in and we're seeing babies, and I'm going, he's 17. I'm too young. But I mean, you do it, and you just use humor, you know, with that. Humor tends to relieve some stress.
My nicknames would be Big Baller, and I think Uniballer as well as yeah, yes. When I talked about young guys and compassion, and that when Rob was giving us, you know, there's not a lot of compassion. I mean, there isn't. You're like, oh, you're the Uniballer now, and that's how we show love to each other, our male friends. I wanted to say Ryan was certainly not alone in gaining weight during chemo. I would be another one of those guys, and my weakness was anything with bacon and cheese. And so I think I probably gained like 10 pounds during chemo. Rob mentioned, I mean, one of the things that he mentioned was the importance of exercise. And I would say, you know, one thing, you know, post-chemo, post-cancer that I've certainly tried to be mindful of is being in perhaps better shape than I was before I had cancer. And so I've you know, I've become pretty active in some endurance types of events, things that I had never really done before. Really in part, as soon as I was diagnosed, I called, I emailed some people that I hadn't met before, but they ran a group called Give to Live, and I'd heard of them because I knew they had done this long distance bike ride from Halifax to Austin. It was a fundraiser for cancer research, and I'd just been diagnosed, and my head's all over the place, and I'm thinking, well, how could I get involved with helping other people with cancer and that type of thing? And so it came to mind to get in touch with them, and so I helped them with one of their rides. It was only a few months after my chemo, and so I couldn't actually do the ride, but I helped them with support, and so it had always been for me to fully, kind of come full circle with where I'd been and what I'd done. It was always a goal of mine to actually do one of these big rides, and so a couple years ago. We did a ride from Banff to Boulder, and so it was a pretty long ride, a couple weeks, and that was actually a pretty important milestone for me to be kind of to think about where I had been a few years before with this group. I was. I had hair, but it was all curly. It was actually, when you have chemo and it comes back sometimes. So I had this curly set of hair, and it's actually odd to see the pictures of me with curly hair, but that was a big milestone to be in that type of shape, to be able to do 100-kilometer days on the bike day after day, and that was pretty important for me mentally, probably more mentally than physically, and so my wife. She wanted to know what she could get me for Christmas this year, and so I told her that all she needed to do was give. It's actually a pretty big ask. I said all she had to do was give me enough time to train to do what our group does, something called the Big Swim, which is a 14-kilometer swim, and also do the Chicago Marathon. And I was like, this is 5 years since diagnosis. Like, this is a huge deal for me, and she said yes. so we'll see. I haven't done either of them yet, but I am training for them, and it is. I think it's important we're gonna have a party here in June, and I think it's important to mark these milestones because it's serious business, and when you recover from it and can get back on with life and achieving things, I think it's important to mark them. So I guess I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
This is for Ryan and Jonathan. You guys took us on a bit of a roller coaster with your emotions and stuff, what's happening. I want the peak of the roller coaster. When you guys found out your markers were clear and stuff, what sort of exhilaration was that?
That's a good question. I gotta think about that, yeah. Well, I'm 5 years since my RPLND was hit in November, so actually, it was my mom that remembered it and made sure sent me a message and put a nice little Facebook post. So I was like, oh, that's nice. And when I finally got the first blood test and stuff after the RPLND, and you go to meet with Dr. Rendon, and he asks, it's actually a very personal question. He asks if it's working, and if you've tried it since. And it was actually me and a guy named Thomas Cantley who I went through, and he was beside me for the surgery. He did his RPLND as well. And he looked at both of us and he asked us, like, did you try and did you try? He didn't, I did. I was like, it works. And that, you know what? It was, when you finally get that blood result and everything, it was a pretty exciting feeling. And I think we went out as a family and had a supper or something. And I went out with some friends, and I was at university at this time, so I going back after two and a half months after the surgery, and still kind of slowly lugging my body around university and going to classes. I think the biggest reward was actually going to that school and going to school, participating like a normal, student, making new friends, seeing new friends. I think that was the biggest reward, is pretty much getting back to pretty much normal.
Ryan's still on a test schedule of every 3 months for his blood work. So for me, I always get a call from my family doctor the day after, and they go, normal. Yay, okay. That's the high point, because we're still, every 3 months we still go through that process. But the low point was the 21 AFP marker, but we're not there anymore.
Obviously, I talked about low points before, and I think we've talked about how negatives stand out more for you than perhaps positives. I would say for me, the positives, I don't recall any like real emotional highs, and in part perhaps because, as I mentioned before, like I never allowed myself to think that anything was going to go wrong. With the benefit of hindsight and perhaps a little bit of wisdom, I think that's maybe why a 5-year anniversary is so important now, because you're like, you know what, that was some serious shit, and excuse me, pardon my language, but now and also Lori's never said, Jonathan, you're cured. It's always there's no cancer, there's no cancer, but 5 years is a big deal. And you saw what recurrence rates were, and so the 5-year anniversary. I mean, it's a pretty. I mean, this is me ecstatic. Can you tell? I'm very excited here. No, it's a big deal, and something that is quite exciting. I will say, in terms of thinking about highs, I think that probably for my wife, I think she probably like the day chemo ended and the day that I met with Laura, she said there's nothing on your CT. I mean, I think for my wife, because she was a caregiver, she had the kids, she's thinking, I've got my husband and I've got this daughter, and so for her, I think things were much more in the moment for her, and I think she had more highs around that type of those developments, whereas it's perhaps becoming even more real for me the further I get away from it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep. The last item on the agenda was a presentation by Michael Kidd, but he wasn't able to make it today. And so we're just going to move to closing, and I'll say thank you for everyone that presented, and thank you for people that showed up. April is National Testicular Cancer Month, and the Testicular Cancer Canada we're happy to put this event on, and happy for everyone to be here. So hopefully we got a lot of good information. I certainly learned a lot today, and I hope you did too. Thank you.
Just one thing before you leave. So as Cheryl has, she kind of strong-armed me into becoming the chairman of the Testicular Cancer Canada Medical Advisory Committee. But I mean, I have to say it is an incredibly rewarding experience, and to see not only my colleagues and in this sort of environment, but also our patient partners. It's a great experience, and to hear all of these things that we don't talk about in clinic it's very, very rewarding. This is what I chose to do for the rest of my life, and it's very rewarding. So thank you to everyone who shared today and the speakers involved. You made the day great. One plug for Testicular Cancer Canada. There's a lot of things that are in involvement. And I say we. I say we're partnering with the French language Cancer Testicular advocacy group, and we have our medical advisory committee. And it's early on, but we are hoping that we'll make some positive changes, and we're having a great time. So Cheryl, I'm indebted to you and all of your hard work, and I mean, really, she deserves a big round of applause.